Yo, what's up guys? Sean Kober here of the Live Train Perform podcast. Over the next 2 weeks, while I launch this podcast, I'm going to be dropping one episode per day. Then I'm going to drop back to one episode per week. The first episode is an introductory episode explaining who I am, my background, my knowledge, my experience. The second episode is all about goal setting. That's going to be followed up by progress tracking, then building habits, doing the things that you enjoy doing, consistency, restricting temptation, meal preparation, accountability, crap foods, getting started and building momentum, along with hierarchy of value, motivation direction, and your environment. Now, if you go back and listen to each one of those topics again, they are all relevant for optimizing your performance and your everyday life. It's not just to do with health and fitness. Yes, I am a strength and conditioning coach. That is my background, that is my specialization. However, I'm a coach first and foremost, and I need to optimize the other 23 hours of the day so that I can get the most out of my clients for that 1 hour that I'm with them. I will also be answering some of my followers' questions that have posted questions on my Q&A memes, and I'm going to incorporate those answers into the pertinent episodes.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode, which is all about the effect that your environment has on you. We're talking about both the internal environment and the external environment. You are a product of your environment. However, you create your environment. The dictionary describes your environment as the surroundings or conditions in which a person, animal, or plant lives or operates. Today's session is all about how we can influence that environment. So we're going to be covering off on a number of things, but I'm going to start with the story of my time in Afghanistan. Then I'm going to tie that into the effect of both the internal and the external environment and how we can influence that. Then we'll discuss the difference between genetics and epigenetics, which is essentially nature versus nurture. And then we'll wind up the episode answering some questions that have come in from some of my followers. Let's get started. For those who don't know me, I'm a former Australian Army soldier and I deployed to Iraq, East Timor and Afghanistan. So 3 deployments over 6 years. In 2010, I deployed to Afghanistan for 9 months. So I left towards the end of, or 3/4 of the way through 2010 and returned 9 months later, halfway through 2011. Now, during that time, I was deployed as a member of a 4-man sniper team. So it was my role as the lead scout to choose an appropriate route to negate the very real threat of an IED or an ambush or something like that. I was also the combat first aider, meaning that if any casualties came up, it was my job, it was my responsibility to deal with them, and I had to do that on a number of occasions under fire. Prior to deployment, there was months and months and months of lead-up training where we're looking at refining all of our skills and drills so that essentially when the shit hit the fan, our training took over. And I'm so grateful for my mentors, my colleagues, my team leaders, my commanders for smashing me over and over and over again on the basics, because those basics save lives when the shit hit the fan. Our training took over, and we just fell into the habituated patterns that we'd practiced time and time and time again. That external environment is what set us up for being able to perform on the battlefield and under pressure when the shit hit the fan. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. We also have the internal environment, and this is how we perceive the world. This is how we perceive the area that we were going to be going into, and how our confidence was, if we were confident in our skills and our drills and if we could perform under pressure. I was asked on a recent interview if there was a turning point where things became real for me, and I remember this vividly. A few months before we were scheduled to fly to Afghanistan, we conducted a fairly realistic exercise which was focused on reenacting situations that had actually happened in Afghanistan and putting the soldiers that were about to deploy under in those circumstances to see how they would respond. And it was primarily focused on the first aid side of things. So, there were people who had actually lost legs and limbs and things like that, had amputations that we got in as role players so that they could speak about their experiences and how they dealt with it, and just give us some insight into what was going through their mind when they were dealing with a traumatic injury, not just for the person treating, but potentially some of the things that we might have to go through if we find ourselves in that position, which was absolutely a reality that we all had to face. One day when the tempo was a little bit lower, there was a pause put on the exercise and the entire combat team was brought together, and we were like, fuck, something's going on here. And we were informed that there were 2 combat engineers and their explosive detection dog had been killed that morning. And, there was a lot of murmurs going through the entire group. The whole combat team was 400 to 500 people or so. I just remember my 4-man sniper team all looking at each other, and we just kind of gave this nod of acknowledgement. And that meant that we had some things to discuss, and we had to have those hard conversations. And we actually all sat down together after we were informed of that. Obviously we were a couple of months away from deploying there, and we knew the areas that we were going into, and we knew where we were going was fucking dodgy. So a lot of dudes had been killed there, and we knew the threat was going to be high. So we actually all sat down and had a really good conversation and brought our awareness to the fact that we probably will have to pull the trigger. We probably will have to deal with casualties. We probably will have to, face these adversities and get into firefights and things like that. So we had to have that open and honest conversation and say, let's just go over there. Let's do the fucking job as best we can. Doesn't really matter what the government's position is and why they're saying they're sending us over. We've got a job to do. We've got to get over there. And my job is to fucking look after you boys. That's what matters most to me. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that happens. But we first had to bring awareness to that and discuss the fact that there was every possibility that one or more of us might not be coming home. And that made it real for us. When it was real, then we had to manage and control our internal environment, which then influenced how we performed throughout the external environment. Now, I just want to pause there and put emphasis on creating that internal environment. We can only create the correct internal environment once we have the information and we have the awareness to then make a decision, right? So we had those conversations and they were real, they were raw, they were deep. Other people, on the other hand, didn't have those conversations, so it wasn't real for them. We had an understanding of why we were doing this training. And I was lucky that I was part of a 4-man sniper team, so these were some of the best soldiers in the battalion. And, being around a group of, highly efficient, highly professional soldiers, we bring out the best in each other. We were constantly in the pursuit of excellence. We were always striving to become better at our job, better as a person, better as a soldier. So other people, on the other hand, didn't go through this process, and we observed, other sections and combat teams and things like that maybe weren't taking it as seriously and were just going through the motions with some of their skills and drills. And that internal environment that we created also influenced how we perceived and how we reacted to that external environment. So that external environment, that training, was where we really dug in and practiced and did after action reviews and refined our standard operating procedures and had discussions about what worked and what didn't work. And then we'd go out and we'd do it again. We'd make these little tweaks and refinements. We'd go out and we'd do it again. We'd just do this over and over and over again. We had a fucking why. We knew we were going into a dodgy area. We knew that we were probably going to have firefights. We knew that we might have casualties. And, that gave us that purpose. That gave us that direction to then make sure that we invested our fucking time, energy, and effort into getting the most out of our external environment. We had a saying in the army, train hard, fight easy. And I truly believe that the people that set themselves up in the correct mental environment, the correct mental preparation, they created the right internal environment. When the shit got hard, when our fucking ass was hanging out, when we were training, when we were running on fumes, we'd had fuck all sleep, had no food, we hadn't showered, that was when we had to dig deep. And it was the people that had that correct mental preparation, the right internal environment, that said, why am I doing this? Why am I going through this fucking really difficult training? Once we knew the why, then it it made everything else a lot easier. It made the external, the difficulties, the adversities that we were facing, it made it much fucking easier to deal with. On the other hand, the people that didn't create the right internal environment, as soon as shit got hard, as soon as they were tired, they hadn't had much sleep, they hadn't had any fucking food, they fell to pieces. And that was the difference. And, you know, as a soldier, you're looking at the people around you and you're like, well, I'm going to be deploying to a fucking war zone with these people. I need to know who's going to step up when the shit hits the fan. I need to know who's not going to be reliable. You know, it's a fucking life and death situation. So I'm really grateful for the team that I ended up deploying with. They were just a fucking awesome bunch of dudes, highly professional, highly efficient. We had an awesome hierarchy. We had an awesome structure. We had awesome SOPs, and we had an awesome team leader and an excellent HQ element that was his contingent. And they had the respect of all of the boys. We knew that we could count on them. They created that environment leading into deployment, which then set us up to deal with what we had to deal with. Now, we had a number of casualties. We had a few deaths. We had IEDs and gunshot wounds and things like that. But I truly believe that if we didn't have that hierarchy and we didn't have those boots on the ground, those blokes that were on that base, I really believe that, you know, our circumstances or the circumstances in that or off that combat outpost could have and would have been much worse. Now, that's an example of how the internal environment can impact the external environment. What I'm going to do now is flip the switch and speak about how the external environment can also impact the internal environment. Prior to deploying to Afghanistan, I was part of a 12-man sniper cell, and that 12-man sniper cell was split up into 3 4-man teams, and each 4-man team went to the 3 individual valleys that we were working in, and we were based at the, you know, the dodgiest area in each valley. So my 4-man team was based at Cop Marshall, which was a combat outpost that had, you know, 30 to 40 Australians and probably no more than that at any one time. And our role was to provide mentorship and liaison to the Afghani National Army that we were training, so they could essentially provide their own security for their own areas of operations in their own country. And there are a number of elements that made up our team. There was the headquarters element, there was our sniper team, there was the combat engineers, mortars, the security section were all infantry soldiers. They were all recon qualified dudes, and they were all absolute beasts in their own right. As well as having, you know, other guys, other attachments with their own skills and assets and capabilities that they brought to the team. And down to a soldier, every single boot on the ground was highly professional and capable and reliable in doing their job. And that made a massive difference to our collective mindset. Yes, it obviously affected our individual mindset. I knew what the 3 dudes in my sniper team were capable of, and I knew that I could trust them. I knew that I could rely on them, and, you know, that also picks me up. So I didn't want to let them down either. But the collective of the 30 to 40 soldiers on that base, the collective mindset was fucking amazing. Everyone was confident in not only their own abilities, but the blokes either side of them and those in support roles as well. So that made a massive impact on how we were able to influence our internal environment. When you're comfortable, when you trust the external environment, then that also gives you peace of mind and allows you to control your internal environment. Another thing that made this a really special group to be a part of was our boss, our leader. Now, Pez is a tall, lanky dude and an unassuming soldier. If you passed him on the street, you'd never think that he was, you know, such a badass soldier, but his strengths were his leadership style and the trust that he placed into every single person that was under his command. An example of this is when we had a patrol, we knew we were going out, we would go into the command post, and the leaders of each individual element would go into the command post, and Pez would say, right, this is what we're doing, this is the intent of this patrol, this is what I want to achieve, how are we going to do that? And then he'd go around the command post, and each individual element, the snipers, mortars, engineers, security section, etc., they would all have their own input. They would all contribute to the plan. And then Pez would go, yep, sweet, I'm happy with that. back in at whatever time, let's go through a full set of orders. And this allowed the leaders of each individual element to go back to their specific teams and give warning orders and basically give a layout of where we were going, what we were going to do, and what needed to be carried in order to achieve the mission. And this instilled confidence in every single team and gave them ownership for what they were contributing to the overall task. And this trust in the individual teams as subject matter experts in their own fields created a profound effect. It showed that the boss had confidence and trust in each one of his individual elements, and that allowed the individual elements to then put trust back onto the boss because we were a team, we had to work together. So as snipers, for example, we were really fucking good at being snipers. We knew what had to be done. We knew what our strengths and weaknesses were. Same as the security section or the recon soldiers. They knew what their role was. They knew what they could provide. Likewise for all the mortarmen and all the individual elements they had, they understood what their strengths and weaknesses were, which allowed the boss to have a look at the big picture and manage and guide how the task was evolving. This trust and respect created an amazing team environment, which essentially allowed us to use a decentralized command. So basically when something happened, everyone knew what their role was, everyone knew what their drills were, and people would take the initiative and not have to wait for the boss's orders. Everyone knew what was on the line, everyone knew what they needed to do, and the boss trusted each individual element to make the right call on the ground. And that had a fucking massive impact on our mindset, our attitude, and how we approached our work. We all didn't want to, do anything wrong. We didn't want to let anyone else down. We always wanted to be the best. We always wanted to make the right decisions. And that external environment that the boss had created by showing trust in his individual teams created a great internal environment, which then impacted the external environment again and how we performed. Our brain receives input from the external environment via our 5 senses. Once we receive this information, then our internal environment determines and processes what we then do with that information. And some of that information is going to be processed in different ways, but this comes down to experiences, this comes down to habituated patterns, this comes down to training and conditioning. And once we've processed the input, then we create a response, which is our output or our action. So essentially, your internal and external environment are interrelated. We receive this information from the external environment, we process it via the internal environment, and then we express that back to the external environment. So this is how we perceive the world. We look at things through filters, and if we understand this, then it's much easier to comprehend that when we can control one portion, either our external environment or our internal environment, then we can influence the output and the outcome of whatever's happening in our lives. So our training and our conditioning that we undertook prior to deploying put us in a good environment, put us in a good internal environment, along with the fact that our boss had trust and respect in every single person within the team, and particularly the team leaders and the subject matter experts, to be able to do our jobs and rely on us to make the right decision on the ground. Now, that obviously affected our external environment once we were on the ground. However, with training, you can only replicate the conditions so far. So once we got on the ground, we were actually in country for 2 weeks, and we did a few partner patrols with the battalion that was there before us, the battle group that was there prior to us. And they'd done a heap of really good work in the area. They had one of their guys killed, unfortunately. But they did a heap of good work in the area. So the Taliban were fighting hard to regain the initiative and get back to, owning and operating in the space. So once they got on the Chinook, we did a solo patrol, and we had intelligence that there was 20 Pakistani Taliban in the area that had come in to fight to take back control of that area of operations. And we actually ran into them at the start of our patrol. They were coming out of a mosque as we were patrolling past. Now, they looked completely different to most of the other, or all of the other fighting age males in the area. So we fucking knew it was them. but there was nothing we could do about it because they didn't have any weapons or communications equipment or anything like that. So unfortunately, that was our rules of engagement. But we literally looked them in the eye, shook their hands. We obviously searched them and tried to find any incriminating evidence or anything like that. But essentially, they didn't have anything. So we looked them in the eye and shook their hands, and they fucked off, and we continued patrolling. And we knew that it was going to be kicking off later on. So we continued our patrol and set off to conduct a cordon search of a particular koala complex where we had intelligence that they were caching weapons and ammunition and things like that. And our sniper team was conducting a satellite patrol, which was keeping an eye out for, anyone keeping eyes on the main body, the engineers that were conducting the search and things like that. And we got word over the radio that the search had been completed, and it was our role to push out and break out of the green zone. Now, as we were patrolling out of that area, the atmospherics started deteriorating, and people were coming out and grabbing their goats and children and shit like that. And we're like, oh, fuck, something's going down here. Like, this is not good. So we pulled into a little bit of cover, and anyway, we basically got ambushed, and my team leader was shot. And we had to do whatever was necessary to get out of that situation. So we returned fire. We got ourselves into a firefight, and as the incoming fire was dying down, I moved over to my team leader who'd been shot, dragged him into cover, and then started patching him up. Had to administer IV fluids, and by that stage, the rest of the main body had caught up with us, and we had the medic with us who then took over the first aid responsibilities. From there, we went up onto the high ground and found an overwatch position where we could provide battlefield commentary and direct fire support if needed to our boss whilst they continued the fight. So we'd been in location for roughly 30 minutes or so on this high ground where we were observing, looking for targets to engage and passing information to the boss. And one of the boys just swept a little bit of dirt aside, and he looked at us with fucking big wide eyes and was like, holy fuck, I think we're sitting on top of an IED. And luckily, it didn't go off. Otherwise, it would have taken out the rest of our 4-man team. So one of the boys was already on a chopper, and we only had 3 boys left. Now, we didn't know what was happening with our team leader, Seamus. He had a gaping hole in his leg that we tried to patch up as best we could before we put him on the helicopter, and we didn't know if he was going to live or die or lose a limb or anything like that. And then we sat on top of a fucking IED that, luckily enough, didn't go off. Now, we got back to base, did an after-action review, and obviously everyone was shaken up and had these thoughts going through our minds. And, our fucking team in particular had almost been killed twice that day within, an hour of 2 incidences. Now, the next day we had to go out on patrol again. It was our job. We had to make sure that we own the space and restrict freedom of movement to the Taliban. So the next day we geared up, we stepped out on patrol, and as we finished the patrol, we were heading back to base, and a shot rang out. And a round landed between a heap of the boys, and we fucking hit the deck and tried to observe where the incoming fire was coming from. And myself and one of my mates was sitting on top of a ridgeline and trying to observe where the shot come from. We were using our binoculars, we were scanning, we were observing, looking for targets. And the Taliban had actually moved up a re-entrant in some dead ground and come up on top of a feature and fucking lit us up. A burst of machine gun fire came right between my mate and I. And I was like, dude, what are you shooting at? And he's like, that wasn't me. I was like, fuck, break contact. So we got up and we hooked it, and I started lobbing some high explosive grenades and, kind of got the better of the situation. And once we got back to base, I was like, fuck, man, that was a close call. And one of the boys was like, which one of you guys commando rolled out of the way? And I was like, yeah, that was me. And he goes, man, those fucking rounds literally missed you by inches, man. You're so lucky. Now, those situations obviously had an impact on my internal environment, and I was like, holy fuck, this is going to be a long deployment. At that stage, we were only supposed to be there for 8 months, but this was 2 weeks into an 8-month deployment, which ended up turning into a 9-month deployment. So you can imagine what my mindset was like. I was like, fuck, this is going to be a rough deployment if this is what it's going to be like for the entire time. And I struggled to get to sleep. I struggled to manage my mind because I had all these what ifs going through my head, and it was probably about 2 weeks where I was really struggling to get to sleep, and I was constantly replaying those circumstances and running these what if scenarios in my mind, and it really affected my ability to sleep, which meant that I was waking up tired, I was waking up fatigued, which ironically affected my ability to perform and make good decisions on the ground, which then increased the likelihood of those scenarios that I was running in my head of actually happening. So once I realized that I had to manage my mind. I had to start putting some processes in place that was going to allow me to kind of chill out the central nervous system and allow me to get some fucking sleep, because it was ruining me. The fear and anxiety were real, and my worst nightmare was not that I would step on an IED and lose a leg or cop a round to the chest or something like that. It was that as the lead scout, I would make a mistake and I would miss something, and the bloke behind me would take the brunt of the explosion or cop a round in the chest or something like that. And I knew that if I didn't fucking manage my mind, then I potentially would have had somebody else's life on my conscience for the rest of my life. So what I started doing was just simply counting my breaths every night before I went to bed. Some nights were harder than others, and sometimes I'd kind of get lost in my own thoughts and start playing these what if scenarios again. But once I just focused on the breath, it allowed me to kind of bring my mind internally and not focus on the external things, because I realized that there were so many things in the external environment that I couldn't manage, I couldn't control. So all I could do was manage my internal environment, and that simply started with being present, focusing on my breath, and that allowed me to get some restful sleep, and that allowed me to be able to be at my best and be able to perform at my best. And once I made that change, it made a huge difference to my ability to get to sleep and make good decisions on the ground. I changed my mindset, I changed my attitude, and over time, I realized that we were in control. This was our fucking turf. We were going to go out there and we were going to do whatever we could, whatever was necessary to maintain security of that area. And once I changed that mindset, it really helped me be at ease and, be on the front foot, to be able to set up my internal environment to impact my external environment. That external environment had not changed. What had changed was my internal environment, which then changed my perception. And once I changed my perception, I realized that we were in control. We were going to fight on our terms. I had to make the decisions to choose an appropriate route. I had to keep my eyes keen and my ears keen for any threat that came up, and, potentially negate that threat as needed. And once I stopped looking at my roles and responsibilities as an obligation and rather look at them as an opportunity, then it made a huge difference with our ability to dominate the ground and provide the security to the local population. If I had said that I wasn't afraid of dying or making a mistake that could potentially result in the death or the casualty of one of my teammates, then I'd be lying, but I'd accepted it. Once I was at ease with the fact that the next step I took could be my last on two legs, or the next breath that I took could be my last, it became a battle of the mind, and I was going to do absolutely everything in my power to choose an appropriate route that would negate the threat of an IED or an ambush, or put ourselves in a position to catch a Taliban off guard and identify and eliminate those threats before they became threats. It was only a couple of years ago that I was talking to one of my good mates who was also in Afghanistan at the same time. He discharged from the army and is now a yoga teacher. And I was telling him that story about how I couldn't get to sleep and that I was just simply using my breathing to get to sleep to change my mindset. And he stopped me mid-sentence and he was like, "Dude, you've been meditating for years. You just didn't know it." Because I saw how much of an impact some breath work could have on my mindset, especially when the stakes were so high, I've now implemented some breath work into my daily routine, and that just kind of helps me chill out, calm down, put myself in a good headspace to prepare for the day ahead. And this also allows me to get to sleep. Now, I'm going to go through a full episode on mindfulness and meditation, but think about it like this. Mindfulness and meditation doesn't fucking mean that you need to sit cross-legged and chant Om Shanti Shanti for an hour. That might simply be sitting on the beach with your toes in the sand and the sun on your face, listening to the waves roll in. That is simply being present. Anxiety is negative thinking focused on the future that hasn't happened yet. Depression, on the other hand, is negative thinking focused on the past and dwelling on mistakes and things that you should have or could have potentially done different. Mindfulness is being present. It's being in the here and the now and understanding that the past is the past and you can't change it, and knowing that the next decisions you make are what's going to shape your future. So the biggest takeaway from this episode is that both your internal and external environment are interrelated. They both affect each other. Now, this is obviously a weird time that we're in right now with quarantine and lockdown and sickness all throughout the world. And you can't control the external environment. When you have no control over the external environment, you must manage the internal environment. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be bringing you some tools and techniques to help you do that. I'll be presenting a 10-part mini-series on the principles of SwissAid. SwissAid is a veteran-owned charity that helps people schedule in and structure the important things of their lives. I'm an ambassador for those guys, so please make sure you go and check them out. Excellent initiative that are doing great things in the veteran, first responder, and mental health space throughout Australia, and hopefully are going to start taking on the world as well. I hope you guys thoroughly enjoyed this episode and got some takeaway and actionable tips from this. To cap off the episode, I do want to give testament to the boys that I worked with on Cop Marshall in Afghanistan. They were one of, if not the best team environment that I've ever been involved with. So at any one time, there was only about 30 to 40 Australian soldiers on this base, and the battle group consisted of roughly 1,200 to 1,500 soldiers. So from this small base, there were some high accolades awarded after the war in the Australia Day Honours and Awards lists. Our boss Pez was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, which is awarded for distinguished leadership in action. Our medic Robbo was awarded the Commendation for Distinguished Service, which is awarded for distinguished performance of duties in warlike operations. And I was awarded the Commendation for Gallantry, which is awarded to military personnel for acts of gallantry in action. And my counterpart, Tamps, he was awarded the Commendation for Gallantry 2 years earlier for actions under fire in Afghanistan when one of his mates was killed. So I just want to give a big ups to all the boys that I serve with in Marshall. I fucking love you guys. Miss you all. Hope you're all doing well. I couldn't think of better blokes to have beside me on the ground and cover my back. So I'm sure I'm saying this on behalf of Pez and Robbo as well, is that I accepted that award on behalf of fucking everyone on that base. So thank you guys very much. Never above you, never below you, always beside you. Brothers by choice. Before I wind up the episode, I just want to give a big shout out to the entire sniper cell for being such fucking professional soldiers and being amazing at what they do and constantly pushing each other to strive for excellence and always chasing better. Mac leading from the front, who was the head of the sniper cell, then our team, Seamus, Tamps and Rob, and then Burles came in and took over as team leader once Seamus was hit. Tamps, mate, you're a fucking stud. Your ability to keep your composure under all circumstances was extremely admirable, and it was you were my fucking rock, man. I looked at you when the shit hit the fan, and you led by example, so I appreciate your mentorship, mate. Except for that one time that you threatened to kick me off the hill. Kay's team, Kay, Bobby, Bicky, and Gus, you guys are fucking legends. Hope you guys are all doing well. And a special mention must go to Dan's team. Dan, Aves, Robbo, and Rolo. Dan was awarded the Commendation for Distinguished Service, and Aves was awarded the Medal for Gallantry. To provide context and give an example of the caliber of blokes that I worked with and the environment that I was surrounded by, in 2011 we got back from Afghanistan. 2012 there was the Australia Day and Queen's Birthday Honours and Awards list, and out of a total roughly 1,500 people in our battle group, there were 12 citations awarded, and three of those awards were given to our 12-man sniper team. So that's just an example of how your environment can either bring out the best in you or it can sabotage you. So I'm really grateful for getting the opportunity to be surrounded by such highly regarded and highly professional soldiers. Not only really fucking good soldiers, but really good dudes as well. Everyone was all about bringing each other up. There was none of this shooting down shit. There was no tall poppy syndrome, which, you know, you typically find in other areas and other sections and things like that. Everyone was all about, hey man, let's bring everyone up together. Let's all work together. Let's all strive for better. Let's all chase excellence together. And I fucking appreciate that. And that rounds out the episode. I apologize for not getting into the genetics, epigenetics, nature versus nurture. However, I will touch on this in another episode. I just kind of got on a little bit of a roll there and went off on a little bit of a tangent and decided to roll with it. So thanks for bearing with me, guys. I'll see you in the next episode, which is going to be a Q&A session.
If you enjoy the content that I'm bringing to you guys, please help me spread the message and like, save, share, and subscribe. And pass this off to your friends, your family, anyone that's relevant in your life that it could potentially help. And please make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review. Much love, guys. Peace.